So there are two things, as I talk today, that I want you to keep in mind throughout the conversation. And it's and they're throughout here, but I decided that it's best probably just to write them down at the beginning, so your mind, as we talk, goes back to these two areas. One is the word expectations. And the second word is accountability. So those are your two words. And then a subset of expectations is simply the word clear. Because if my expectations are clear, then we should be able to agree upon at the end of it whether or not you met my expectations. If they're unclear, then we might have some conversation that doesn't go so well in our relationships. And then accountability, I want you to redefine this word in your mind. If you think traditionally the way I think of accountability, and I don't know why, but maybe it's just from childhood, you're going to be held accountable to that. And it has somewhat of a punitive sense to me. And I'm asking you to rethink that word accountability. And I'm asking you to put it in the context of feedback and support. In other words, I'm there if ultimately we're going to agree upon a certain expectation and we're going to hold ourselves accountable, then I better make sure that there's a system of feedback and support there for you along the way so that there aren't surprises at the end. And then, just because I keep saying it probably, I'm going to put down here the word systems. Because I think systems are important. So what do I have? There's my clicker. So this is Leadership is Not Tidy. Hopefully when you walked in, maybe you had a chance to read it. Maybe it's too small for you to read, I don't know. But I'm going to read it to you. Leadership is not tidy. Decisions are made and then revised or reversed. Misunderstandings are frequent. Inconsistency inevitable. Achieving a goal may simply make the next goal more urgent. Inside every solution are the seeds of new problems. No leader enjoys that reality, but every leader knows it. So what I really like about this, and this is by John Gardner, who wrote the book on leadership. And John Gardner is just one of these leadership gurus and I don't know if John's still living or not, or Mr. Gardner, but he's just been a leadership guru of the past. What I like about this especially is that for those of you who have been in my office, this is pinned to my back, the back area behind my credenza. And it's the version that I've got is kind of, and you can see it's kind of on an angle. It's got spots over it. It's been copied a lot of times. And for me, symbolically, this is symbolically what leadership's about. Leadership's not tidy. Leadership is messy. And once you realize that, it makes it easier for you to be a leader. And as we get into the conversation, the leader, understand for me, I'm talking about leadership in the context of having positive influence over others. I'm talking about in the context of taking responsibility for action. And so anybody can be a leader. And in this organization, I'm saying everybody needs to be a leader. Because we can't afford, with the numbers that we have, to be able to have a situation where not everyone takes a leadership role. And that's just taking responsibility for action. There you go. So, clicking on it. I swear I'm clicking on it. It's not in presentation mode. All right. So since they're fixing that, I'm going to tell you a quick story because I can't help but not tell stories. Who knows my story about the plant in the front of City Hall and the city? Cheryl knows the story of the plant. Come on, someone else has heard me tell the story of the plant. You guys have heard the story of the plant. You want to hear? I'm going to tell you the story of the plant. And this goes into leadership context. You'll notice when you walk into City Hall, the beautiful glass windows, that Matt does a remarkable job of keeping clear and clean. There's another side to keeping windows clear and clean. is that I didn't know why we have these beautiful plants in City Hall when I first started here years ago. I thought they were really nice, and I thought someone just ordered them, and just put them in, and there they've been ever since for the last, since 1982, so over 30 years. And then one day I had a personal experience of why the plants were there. There was an elderly gentleman who was near the door over near Human Resources, and he was walking out the door, and he just clocked himself right into the window. Boom! And he bounces off the window. And I happened to be standing right there, and I felt so bad for him. I went up to him, I said, "Sir, how are you? Is everything okay?" And he, like a typical male, was just like, shaking me off, even though he was a little older, and he's like, "Hey, I'm okay, don't worry about me." And I was just like, oh my gosh. And it hit me then that he didn't see the window. He was just walking, and he was going straight out into the courtyard, and he caranged right off the window. And so I helped him as best I could. And then someone who was actually in my department at the time, I'll admit it, this was in my administrative services department, says to me, "Steve, I've been telling them for the past week to move that plant." And it's remarkable to me because here's a person who I think she no longer works for the city, so don't try and find the person, all right? This was 15 years ago. So don't do sleuthing. I know that the police officers are going, we're going to figure this one out. And I think she thought she was taking a leadership role by showing that she had taken the responsibility to tell someone to do it, right? In my mind, the leader is the person who walks behind the counter, goes over and gets the plant, and just moves the plant over about 5 feet over in front of the window. And so that's the context of leadership for me, is people who take that responsibility for action. So that now that that's done, we'll go back to the presentation. But I think it's still a fun story to think about. So I used to work with a woman who flew in the Air Force. She flew, is it C-130s, like these cargo planes. And she told me about how in the Air Force they really told you that you knew the plan. Before you went out, you had to know what the plan was, the plan of attack, the plan of action, and you studied the plan intimately, and you were held responsible for knowing all the facets of the plan. But they also knew that undoubtedly in the military that things could go wrong. And so for her, more importantly, she said they always knew that they had to fly the mission. Because if the plan went awry, they had to step back and say, okay, what's our mission here? And they had to adapt the plan as need be in order to know what the mission was. And this has been helpful for me in my life because whenever I start to get a little uncertain about what's going on and where we need to go, say, as an organization, I think back to what's the mission and are we flying the mission? So to start the conversation today, I'd like to talk about flying the mission and knowing the city's mission. I won't quiz you on this because if you don't know it, you need to know it, but this should come to you by heart. The whole mission is a long sentence, and I'm okay. I think everyone might want to know that, but that's okay if you only know these 3 core components: quality, service, innovation, and leadership. So if you're flying the mission, then you've got these things in mind. And by the way, some of the people in this room, I know some of the people in this room are flying the mission. Because when I asked for purpose statements from folks, and they submitted purpose statements to me, and I think this might have been, where'd Terrell go? It was managers, supervisors, and participants in many of the Leadership Academy, the UC Davis training. People came back to me with a purpose that was not narrow in definition, but extremely broad in definition. And they included these components. And they saw their role as advancing quality service and leadership, quality service, innovation, and leadership in this organization. So in order to, if I'm going to say to you, my expectations are that you're going to individually, including me, all of us advance the mission, and that we're going to have systems of accountability. What I propose to you is that we have to have common definitions of these. In other words, they have to be clear. We have to know what we're talking about when we talk about these. So in terms of quality service, from my perspective, it's aiming to exceed customer expectations. Now, if in your role, you have a different definition of quality service that better suits your needs to deliver services to the customer, I'm okay with that. I am. What I do in my mind is I try to make things as simple as possible so that when I'm talking to someone about how I expect them to deliver quality customer service, that we have a metric, a measurement at the end of the day that we can go up against. And to me, exceeding customer expectations is something that I think few of us can argue. That when we feel like expectations have been exceeded, we know it's quality service. And many of us know when our expectations haven't been exceeded. They've been, under exceeded. And it's too bad, but most often we share those stories because they're more fun to gossip about than the exceeding customer expectation stories. So the second one is innovation, and that's creating an environment to spark new ideas. Once again, my definition, you got a better one, I'm all for it. Innovation isn't as much an end goal. It's just a means, a process. Innovation I don't see necessarily as anything magical. I see it as me knowing that Brian Bernardis may have a certain expertise, and me reaching out to Brian and saying, "Hey, Brian, I'm looking for some ideas in this area. Can you throw me some ideas?" And he might be able to throw me some ideas in that certain area. It's me reaching out to other city managers. I just sent out an email the other day with regard to annexations. And I said to the other city managers, "Hey, I've got this annexation going. We've got a big area we're annexing. We want to make sure we don't hit any pitfalls. I'm looking for some feedback from everyone on your experience on large-scale annexations." And the feedback's starting to flow in. That's part of innovation. It's not Steve Kroeger having a brilliant idea. I'm still waiting for it. It's the ability to tap into resources out there and find new ideas. Tap into those people on your staff and give them the responsibility and the ability to find new ideas and how to do things better. Finally, leadership. A big component we've been focusing on as an organization over these past 2 years is encouraging individual responsibility for action. This is one that's probably the most difficult for me to define because leadership can be defined in so many different ways. I prefer the most fundamental definition of leadership, that it goes back to the story of the person, just didn't take responsibility, take the action. It shouldn't have taken someone to tell them that they had permission to go do and move a plant. So any questions on those three core components of our mission? Okay. So I've already said this. I've said that expectations must be clear. And part of that is that if we're going to build systems to advance our mission and evaluate our progress, we better make sure we have the same common definitions, and that our expectations or outcomes are clear, and that accountability must include systems of support and feedback. And so that's the definition that I talked about previously. So we've got the mission. We've got a common definition. Like I said, for the sake of conversation today, we're going to go with those definitions that I proposed. As we move forward, someone's got better definitions. Like I said, you apply in your specific instance, go for it, do it. Whatever works best in your instance. So you got the mission, you've got the definitions, you've got the fact that we need to have clear systems of clear expectations, and we have to build systems of accountability. So how do we do that? It suggests to you that there are 3 different levels at which we need to build these systems. The first is at the individual level. The second is at the team level. And then finally, it's at the organization level. So let's talk about each one of those. The individual level, for those of you who are managers and supervisors, that's the one that I'll suggest is most within your control. This is you having a relationship with each one of your staff members. And you're evaluating them through a performance plan process. And through the performance plan process, this is interesting, 4-step process in terms of performance plans. And I want you, as you're seeing these go up here, to reflect upon how many of the 4 you've experienced in your career. Because of the 4, there's one that pretty much all organizations do. There's another one that good organizations do, and the high-performing organizations do all 4. And I'm not looking for any confessions today, but I do ask that you reflect on how effectively you're implementing or receiving the implementation of these. So expectations. I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. So this is the initial performance plan at the beginning. I sit down with you, and I say, Jimmy, these are the parameters of how we define success. That's what I want you to do. The second is I support you. I give you the tools that you need. What do you need to reach this end goal of support? And I provide you what you need to reach that end. So I'm providing you the support. The third step, my opinion, is probably the most important, and that's the ability to be providing helpful observations along the way. It's just communication. It's just making sure, how are you doing? What's your progress? What's going on? Are we doing well? Are we not doing well? And then the fourth and final is the periodic evaluation. That's where we go, okay, this is what you did well, this is what you didn't do well. Step 4, that accountability step, should be no surprises. But in my career, I have seen many instances where people are dumbfounded by step 4 in the accountability. And I never know who to blame for that, frankly, because, and there's some unique circumstances, so this isn't 100%, but a lot of times it's because, I'll ask you, which step do you guys think is the one that pretty much all organizations do? Number 1? Okay. What about a different number? Okay, that's it. So that's what. So I would say Katie said number 1, and I'd say I'd agree with Brian that it's accountability. I would say that's the first one, that no matter what, it's like, hey, we have to have an evaluation process. That number 2 that the organizations most often do too is the plan. I'm going to give you a plan. I'm going to hold you accountable. What I'm suggesting to you that the most important steps are 2 and 3. And too often we get lost in the busyness of work and provide reasons as to why we don't get to 2 and 3. It's a really, if we're a caring organization, if an organization is a caring organization, then they're providing steps 2 and 3. I would even suggest that I was talking to Terrell about this, and we were saying, in the high-tech organizations, my guess is that 2 and 3 are the ones that are the most active. They're constantly saying, hey, I need you to do this, here are the tools, and I'm giving that feedback. Because it's so dynamic, that to the degree that they can have long-term plans, I'm sure they do at the higher levels, but it's probably a very dynamic environment. And that if we're able to work with each other on that continuous basis, that's the benefit. So here's a graphic, just another way of explaining it. At the outset, that's the performance plan. That's where I'm giving you the tools. There's the continuous feedback along the way. And then finally is the periodic evaluation that occurs. I'm a visual learner. This is what's easiest for me. In fact, we've talked about, I think, that as we go forward with performance plans, the previous slide and this slide, we can just attach it on the back. And so that the managers and supervisors are all working off the same sheet of music. Any questions about this? I think it's pretty simple. I try to keep it simple in my mind. It doesn't always work that way. So we address the individual level. Now talking about the team level. So this would be a supervisor's scope of responsibility, the group over which she or he oversees. And how do we advance the mission? I'm going to suggest to you that it's through, besides the individual performance plans, it's through team meetings. And when I say team meetings, I'm not talking about staff meetings. There's a clear distinction between the two. Staff meetings is where you talk about housekeeping issues, what's going on, What is the who's off this week? Who's on this week? How are we going to cover the counter? How are we going to get the right officers out in the street to the right area? The team meetings are the time for conversation about continuous improvement, about how we do business as an organization, about why we have a certain permit that requires a 10-step process, and everybody knows that it could probably be a 5-step process, but man, it's just been such a hassle, and we're just so busy that we just need to keep doing things the way we've always done them. For the time being, we'll get to it, and we never get to it. And those team meetings are the times when those new ideas should be fostered, and that we should provide that encouragement of our staff to give us feedback. Whether it's through brainstorming with them, evaluating how we do business, or building a better mousetrap. There are different mechanisms for this. One of the 5 whys that for any of us who can recall our kids at their young ages, we can recall the 5 whys. When your son or daughter asks you something and you give them an answer and they say why, and the whys keep coming. Why is just a good way of exploring why we do things. Why do we fill in the blank? And you keep asking whys until you get to the core of the problem. This isn't rocket science, but they're just these mechanisms that we can use to try to evolve our minds into a different place and get new ideas. So the third level is the organization level. So this is where your department head, your executive team group with the city manager should have a large focus on cross-departmental efforts. These are some of the things that we've been doing as an organization, the 97% team, the UC Davis training, and the Leadership Academy. So we've focused on leadership, focused on quality service. A question was raised in an earlier presentation, well, what about innovation? Are we giving short shrift to innovation? And it was an interesting question, and it's a twofold answer. One is that innovation, you heard me say earlier, is more of a process than an outcome. But that said, the executive team has had conversations about how we might adapt our training. So as much as we're doing the UC Davis leadership training, do we start to morph that? Do we start to change it? Do we put an emphasis on innovation? Because we don't want to just get into we don't want to get into a rut where we're just going, yeah, we always do the UC Davis leadership training. You've been through it, great. If you're not, that's fine. You'll go to it sooner or later. Do we get the people who found benefit in the UC Davis leadership training and now adapt it into some sort of innovation training, maybe provided by someone else who specializes in innovation? So there are these ideas, and I don't ever want anyone to think that there's an exclusive group who has to make these decisions. Is it my expectation that the executive team will have this on their mind? Absolutely. Is that exclusive by any means? No. I mean, I always look for the ideas that come maybe at your team meeting that you pass up through the organization, or just drop by my office and poke your head in and say, hey, my team has got a great idea, and I want you guys to think about this. So, what's next? It's a blank screen. So this is a prompt for me. This is a prompt for me to say I'm going to suggest a 4th level. We talked about individual, we talked about team, we talked about organizational. And the 4th level is actually the one through which each and every one of us has the most control in terms of advancing the mission. And that's ourselves. And that's individual reflection. And that's holding ourselves accountable. That's deciding what we value and what's important to us and what's important to the organization, and personifying that on a daily basis, showing other people through our actions what we're about. So consistent daily actions is, I'm just going to go through the slide and then we'll talk about it. So your actions develop into habits, and your habits develop into the culture. So this is reverse engineering. Because people talk about a culture being messed up. And someone says, man, let me tell you about this place I know where I used to work. That culture is just screwed up. And it's really, it made me think a lot about organizational culture. Because it's so broad in definition. It's so unspecific. And it's like, how do you put your finger on a culture? Well, if you reverse engineer it, I mean, you can turn these arrows and you can put them in the backwards direction. That culture is the culmination of habit. each of us have habits. And habits are the culmination of daily actions. So if we want to change our habits, we know what we do individually. It's as much as Hero brings donuts into the break room every morning. Which, by the way, I was over at the police department today, and I noticed that they had donuts. And there's apparently a magic donut fairy that visits not only City Hall but other facilities as well. If your discipline is not to eat donuts, then you know that your daily action better not be to eat donuts, and you better develop that habit of not eating donuts. And then you're not a donut eating culture. I don't know. I mean, that's probably a funny way of saying it, but just recognizing that in what we do. So where are we aligning our actions? Are we practicing what we preach? Are we holding ourselves accountable? And we all know that actions speak louder than words. So if I'm up here preaching one thing to you, but you know that I'm not practicing it, my credibility is shot. It's like, there goes Steve again, talking about quality service. But did you see what he did to that customer the other day? Oh my gosh. So my credibility and my ability to affect change has just been neutered. I guess that's a funny word to use, but it's been eliminated. I can no longer affect at the individual level, meaning my relationship with my staff member and with us, with the team level, or with the organization as a whole, because I'm not practicing what I preach. So when we talk about consistent daily actions and we talk about alignment with values, your Leadership Academy from this past year put together their Effective Leader Pyramid. And these are leader traits that they identified. You're not going to find one you can argue with. You might find substitutions. Communicator, ethical, selfless, vision, inspirational, honesty, respectful, flexible, innovative, compassion, consistent, dedicated, lead by example, approachable, and integrity. Words, just simple words. But what they said is people who exemplify these traits, they see as strong leaders. So my suggestion to everyone, including myself, is to have this in your drawer and on a daily basis pull it out and talk about to yourself, for those of you who don't have other people to talk to, about how you're upholding these values. I don't think one's necessarily more important than the other, but I think the leadership group, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, talked about lead by example at the bottom center and communicator being the two in their minds is most important. I've also said that I think 80% of an organization's problems come from lack of communication. Communication voids, lack of communications, miscommunication, distorted communication, purposeful distortion of communication too. I mean, that happens. So what did the executive team offer to this? They put a word at the bottom, and that's the foundation of accountability. And I really like one of the things that was offered up at a previous meeting, and I won't give attribution to the person who offered it up because this is being videoed, so they might be embarrassed, but they shouldn't be because I don't think they would be. But they talked about how the concept of being a person's wingman. So she said, Steve, you talk about flying the mission, and in the Air Force we talk about having a wingman. And your wingman is your person who you work with who's looking out for you, so that when your behavior is inconsistent with the values that you should be sharing as an organization, then they call you out on it. And I really like that because ultimately we have to help each other to succeed. And I say that not only, I don't say it in a vertical sense. We've already have, every organization has vertical systems of accountability. I'm talking about a horizontal sense. So the vertical sense is your boss and your boss's boss and the people who you may report to you. The horizontal sense is when it's a truly organization when people are looking out for each other. When an executive team member at my level has the feels the responsibility to go to another executive team member who exhibited a behavior that was inconsistent with the values we uphold and saying, hey, you did this the other day and it just didn't seem right. And doing it in a way that isn't offensive, doesn't come across as I'm trying to call you out on it, but does it in a caring way, like I want to see you succeed. Man, you're not going to succeed if you keep exhibiting this behavior. So that's the vertical and horizontal side of accountability. So a lot of information. I boil it down. This is my expectations of you as of the moment I was writing this. But it is meaningful with regard to what I've shared with you. Is I expect that each of you are reflecting on your daily actions. And if you feel that you really have a strong sense of self, that not only reflect on your daily actions, but ask other people to help you reflect on your behaviors and give you feedback. Because the only way that each of us improves is if someone is able to give us honest feedback. Talk to your employees about their performance plans. So that first action is you. The second is at the individual level with your relationship with your staff. And the third is at the team level. I expect that you'll be providing environments to spark new ideas. So this is where the presentation goes into action mode. This is the takeaway for each of you. This is for each of you to look at how you're doing things, to make sure that, and you know, by the way, if you're a staff person, and this is a common message. This isn't for managers and supervisors. This is for everyone. If you don't think that you're in a situation where you have a performance plan that meets the 4 expectations that were outlined, I encourage you to go to your supervisor or manager and say, "Hey, I want something more robust," because that should help you to improve yourself, and it also prevents surprises. If you happen to be in a mode, which you shouldn't be here, but I know this out of 280 employees, things aren't perfect. But we're going to continuously improve. But you might be in that situation where you've been subject to simply being the evaluation, receiving the evaluation, that is, and not having those other components. So what do we change? We change the way we think. We change, this is a mental model for thinking about when you have those days where things seem uncertain and you don't know where you're going, that ultimately you're going to have your plan, your performance plan. And so you're gonna know your plan, but you have to fly the mission. You're gonna have to go back and say something doesn't seem right. Am I focusing on quality service, innovation, leadership? In other words, am I hoping to exceed expectations? Am I creating an environment to spark new ideas? And am I taking responsibility for action? Am I doing those things? Therefore, am I flying the mission? So I ask sincerely what you need from me in terms of a lot of information has flowed over the last half an hour or so. And, there's going to be time to absorb. We'll send the presentation out. But I would like to know what you guys need from me. And so keep that in your mind for a moment. And I just want to reiterate that it's not tidy. I don't expect that you guys are going to have some great epiphany from what I shared with you today. Leadership is going to continue to not be tidy. Decisions are going to be made and then revised or reversed. And if you let that frustrate you, then I'm just saying don't. Just know that that's part of the leadership challenge that all of us are in. But if we can build these systems to advance the mission and know that we're on the same page and have that strong communication as an organization, then I would suggest that it will not be extremely untidy. It'll just be, the nuances of life, and it'll become more understandable to each of us. As we grow in our relationships with each other, I think we also become less judgmental of each other, which is healthy, because each of us are spending 8 hours a day here at work, and we're 24-hour people, at least 8 hours. So sometimes our behaviors at work seem to be a little off. And I always try to remember that there are 16 other hours in a person's day that they're living, that they may be having troubled times. So take that in context and do it in a caring way when we're working with each other. And I think that as much as this untidiness exists, if we have a good understanding of each other as people, then it becomes more acceptable and we're less judgmental. And I think that's part of the keys of a strong organization as well. Questions? Comments? Thoughts? Hero!
Yes. I have in many times those classes, and each time I felt something different. You speak different way, person others speak another way, and what I learned was that a leader who taught me use a wet spaghetti or cooked spaghetti philosophy.
Okay.
And I couldn't understand that. And yet, when I see in action, that handle means a stick of uncooked spaghetti. You hold one hand and then push it. You want to go that way, you can push any way. At that time, I didn't know. And once this is cooked, do that.
Yeah.
Only way is you lead. And then you do something wrong or lead something wrong or not right. You look at back, there's no followers. And then whenever I follow the leader who gives us rules of the game.
Right.
So I could follow. And then leader is practicing. Holding wet spaghetti in one hand, so we can follow.
Yeah.
We can support each other.
That's a good analogy.
Yes, that's the way I learned many, many years ago, not once, few times. And every time I attend those classes, I feel quite comfortable. And I refresh my memory. Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Something did not work what I did.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. Thank you for sharing that, Hero. Come on, I've got some questions over here that were raised by the other groups. I'm just waiting for you guys to have a...
One more thing.
Oh, Hero, go right ahead.
You pointed out action, it becomes a habit,
Yeah.
and then becomes a culture. And before action, thinking stuff. You have to have a thinking. What are you thinking? The reason is I'm still borrowing from an old man, 5,000 years old, Lao Tzu, China. He said 5,000 years ago.
Right.
Actions, before action, thinking.
Yeah.
How we think. And if we have correct, I don't say right thinking, correct thinking, followed by action, and then becomes habit, then become whole culture.
Yes. Yeah. You know, there's I like that in terms of the need to reflect first before we take the action. And I talk about discipline, which is another word that you can look on as a negative context. But the root of the word discipline is disciple. And if you are a disciple to what you believe in, then discipline's easy. You determine what you want as the outcome, and then you become a disciple to that, and it's easy to practice discipline. So it's that reflection on what our actions will be, and that thought, rather than just letting life tell us where to go. It's. I'm thinking back on some of the other sessions that we had and some of the examples that I'll share for fun. Is that in terms of that feedback, we need to make sure that our feedback is helpful and constructive. Because I guess my best analogy is my wife's a track coach, and one of her pet peeves is when she sees a kid from another team running and finish a race, and the coach goes out there and says, "You need to run faster." Okay? But this is interesting. So maybe he's right, all right? But that coach should be saying, okay, the mechanics of where you're running, you need to lift your knees higher. You need to move your hands in a different way. Keep them in closer. They're flailing on the side. So he or she gives constructive feedback so the person knows how to change behavior. Because if we keep it too broad, then it's not meaningful. It's like run faster. I mean, obviously, if the kid was out there running, he or she was trying to run their fastest in the first place. So we have a responsibility to give feedback that's helpful and constructive, rather than just saying, I need you to do something in a broad sense. And I would suggest that each employee should want to be able to say, hey, could you define that a little more for me? Could you define that a little more so that I know that I'm meeting your expectations? I mean, that's what I do with the city council, right? If in a broad sense, right? Part of my job is to anticipate their needs, but if I ever came down to it where we were having a difference of opinion and I'm going, man, I thought I was advancing customer service and innovation leadership, then I would seek from them a more certain definition of what they were thinking about. And so that I could say, okay, I got you. I know what you're saying now. Now I know that we need to broaden, get that Fifth Street Bridge in place or whatever it is. Whatever, that's their definition maybe of the best customer service for the community because we need to get people in and out easily. Whatever it might be. What else do you have? Did I? What was it, John?
It's just people have to be receptive to the feedback as well, and you have if it's not somebody that you're close to personally, then it can be difficult to provide that feedback because you're not certain how they're going to respond. And if someone that you're not necessarily close to provides feedback, you have to be willing to accept that as for what it's meant to be.
Right.
Don't take it personal. Don't take offense or anything.
I think that's a huge step in terms of not taking things personally, because we're human, right? It's so easy just to when someone says something, you just take it personally, and it's a discipline to just take it, like you said, face value. Just take those things. I like to think, and maybe it's just the way I psychologically adapt with life, that when someone's giving me feedback that is misaligned with the way I see myself, that they're helping me. Because perception's reality. And if I perceive myself in a certain way and someone had the gumption to come and tell me that I'm not being received by them that way, then it's a cause for reflection. And absent that person telling me that, then I would have gone about my merry way, continuing to do something in a certain way, and being oblivious to the fact that maybe I should change. Maybe I thought I was doing something that was helpful that actually isn't helpful to other people. And that's tough to receive, and they take that a step further. If someone gives me feedback, let's say Diana, just for chuckles, gave me some feedback, and I said, you're wrong. I don't know what you're talking about. That's just crazy. What's the likelihood of Diana ever coming back to me and giving me more feedback? Well, I'd say no. Because it's like you're wasting my time, right? If I go to someone to get feedback and they just blow me off and go, ugh, it's like, oh, okay. I only have so many breaths, so I'm not going to waste it on you. And so I go on my merry way. It doesn't mean I wouldn't care about the person, but it just means it's like I know where to spend my time. And if someone's receptive, if I ensure that I can stay receptive, keep that human trait of just like that it's a natural defense mechanism that humans have to defend our egos. It just is, and it's not bad, okay? But it goes back to what Hero was saying, to thinking first before we act, and recognizing what the consequences of our certain reactions might be. And if we stay with open arms, then likelihood is people will continue to give us that feedback, which is healthy. It is. It's healthy over time.
You shared a story about Google, was it? A study that they did?
Yeah, and so there was thank you, Darren, for bringing that up. There was a question in a previous meeting of, okay, but how, you talk about team meetings. How do we really make sure that these team meetings, I go into the team meeting and people don't want to give feedback. And there was a study that Google did that they spent millions of dollars to find out the most effective ways for a team to operate. Because they realized that they had so many teams that were working on different issues. They said, we want to go to the fundamentals of what environment do we create to make sure that it's the best environment for teamwork. And it boiled down to 2 words for it all. And the 2 words are psychological safety. And that means I feel comfortable enough in a group to offer opinions without judgment being passed upon me. That it's just accepted for what it is. And I don't feel like people are going to shut me out. People are going to judge me. People are going to act nice to me there, but then when we leave the meeting, say, man, can you believe that Kroeger just brings up the stupidest ideas, right? Those are the damaging things to team environment. And if you can create a team where people feel that you're among equals, if you will, and you have a psychological safety, that I'm okay here. I can offer everything up, and it's just going to be taken at face value. We're going to talk about it. If it goes somewhere, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But then we leave the room and go about that. And it's the responsibility of each of us to create that, but I'll always put responsibility on the manager or supervisor, because that's their role, to make sure that environment is not being created. That is one in which there's controversy or people are being undermining, backbiting, manipulative, gossipy. And you know what? Human beings are inherently that way. It's just the way many human beings are wired. But we have to, it goes back to those actions, to habits, to culture. We have to create environments. If you're going to create an environment where there's psychological safety, then you better go back and reflect upon the actions of the group. If that's a culture you need to create. And I'm suggesting that, here's this company that did this study, and they might be onto something. So, yeah. Right.
Leadership is a broad word.
Yeah.
But there are levels of leadership. Not everybody can.
Correct.
You can lead in the moment. I think that's what you're trying to promote. Recognizing the difference. But the quality of real leadership, the one quality that I've always looked for in a real leadership personality is humility. Where you are not the most important person in the room. You're not the most important voice in the room. But by your presence and actually having humility in everything you do, others feel that desire to over that important. You don't often.
Yeah, we don't, do we? In fact, I'm thinking about it, and I don't think it was one of the words up on the leadership?
I've probably seen it in
Yeah.
editions, but we talk around it, but we never talk about it. That personal characteristic and truly having it, we don't.
Right.
Our egos get in the way.
Yeah.
Actually, many of us who want to aspire to division, whether we have that goal, and we're ego driven.
So it's interesting because you're right, and because the ego-driven For men, you don't think of that in the terms of humility, but there has to be that balance. Like you say, you have to keep it in check. And I don't know what works best for each individual. I think it's a really good point you raise, because I also know, whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, each of us goes home and we tell ourselves a story about how the day went. Okay? And it's the process of us rebuilding our ego. And you have to keep that in check. And that's probably part and parcel of humility. If your ego takes over too much, your ego tells you, that instance where you had that conflict with that person today? It wasn't your fault. It was them. They're the one who's wrong. And we rebuild our ego in order to maintain that strong sense of self. The discipline is making sure that we that we take the time to ensure that we reflect on what really happened. I'm not saying that you have any less sense of self at the end, but that you keep yourself in check and you don't rebuild yourself. I say that I'd rather walk around naked than wear a suit of armor. Okay? That's my philosophy. The suit of armor means you're not getting to me, right? I mean, whatever you say to me, I've got a suit of armor, you're not getting through to it. It's a weird thing, and I've tried to look it up on the internet, and I don't know where I picked it up and who said it, but it's when you liken it to saying you're going to walk around naked, it's mean you're willing, you're open, and you're accepting. It goes back to what Brian's saying about being humble or trying to. And if you say that you're humble, then you're not humble. That's ironic, but it is. It's true. That's not the case.
All of these concepts, you can say anything, but if you don't demonstrate it,
That's it. Yeah.
To piggyback on that too, my worry is that a lot of these really great leaders are so humble and so not as aggressive, so to speak, as some of the others that they don't rise. I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I see that happen over where like you see the attributes and the characteristics of a really great leader, they are lacking something else that actually brings them up. How do you have certain attributes of the greatest leader?
So that goes back to our organization's responsibility to identify those people, and whatever leadership training that we can do to help them grow. Because I call people good clay. All right, it's good clay. They just need to be molded. And sometimes the clay is hardened, and it's hardened into a shape that's not a good shape. And it's like, oh, okay, clay's done. It's hardened. But sometimes we have that good clay here, and if we can put the good clay in the right environment, it gets molded into that future leader in our organization. Yeah, there's a lot to it. In fact, I've enjoyed, just on a side note, I've enjoyed Brian and I have pinged each other back on leadership stuff. And the conversation, if we both wanted to, could go on for a long time, because I enjoy organizational development, and I enjoy people who enjoy organizational development like Brian does. But it's, so that point that Katie raises about these people in our organization who have those vital leadership qualities that are really valued, but they may not be rising or recognizing. That's our leadership challenge, that we have to determine those folks, whether it be at the executive level or whether it be going back to that side of looking out for each other, trying to promote other people and saying, I think you've got leadership qualities. I'd love to see you grow in this organization. It's meaningful. It is. And there are, for those who, most people have taken the DISC evaluation. Anyone not taking the DISC evaluation in this room? Everyone's taken it? All right. Or am I just like asking the question? You guys aren't raising your hands because Kathy, have you taken the DISC? All right. Lexi's taking the DISC. You taking the DISC? All right, you're taking the DISC. Okay. So then everyone can appreciate that we all have different styles. And so, and sometimes, and I guess this is right off of what Katie's saying, Sometimes certain styles are the ones who might get promoted into leadership roles. And sometimes you have a whole bunch of the same type of people in a leadership role, and it's like, well, this didn't work, because ideally you've got a balance between the D, the I, and the S and the C. And that's part of what I look to the executive team when they're creating their groups, that they're evaluating who they're promoting into those roles. Because if we have a group of, say, high Ds, okay, remember this, the DISC, dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. The D's and the C's are the task orientation. The I's and the S's are the relationship orientation. Right? So you got a bunch of D's and C's working together. They're getting a lot of stuff done, but the relationships are suffering. You got a lot of I and S's working together. Those relationships are great, but nothing's getting done. Okay? And that's an extreme. And you're not all thinking about yourself. You're thinking about the other guy right now. Yeah, those guys, man. They're not focused on relationships, and then the relationship folks are going, oh yeah, they're just all task oriented. So that goes back to it's all kind of like circular, because we build those teams, but also it builds better understanding, because we can relate with each other better, and once again, not being as judgmental, because not just, and I'll say something else about DISC. Don't be too proud of what you are, okay? Don't, because it comes naturally to you, all right? It comes naturally. Be proud when you are raising that area that you're weak in. That's a moment of pride. So for the ISs, the moment of pride for them is getting a job done on time. It's like, okay, IS, pat yourself on the back. You got it done. For the Ds and the Cs, the pat on the back is taking the time away from the task and really focusing on the relationship side. And that is something that that's a challenge, and we all have to face that. And I find too often that it's just easy to kind of go, yeah, I'm high D. I'm not. But, for those of you who know me, I'm the lowest D you can get. I'm right down there, which is kind of strange, I think. I don't know, but whatever it is. Because it says peaceful, and my wife would say that I'm not peaceful, but there's the low D's, and so for me, but when the circumstances come, I know myself well enough that I got to raise my D, and I got to take if something's not, I got to go, I got to lower my I, pull the I down, and so that's part of that challenge. See if there's anything. You guys have been actually, I enjoy the smaller group, maybe. I don't know why. It's just, it's been a nice conversation. How we evaluate our individual departments, how do we evaluate our individual department progress toward quality, service, innovation, and leadership? Okay, good question. There was one from the last. They said, Steve, you talk about this, but how are we going to measure it? If you're going to talk about accountability, how are we going to know that we're achieving this? We talked about the fact that we've got citizen surveys that are out there that we've done. So we'll find out this next October how we're doing from another citizen survey that goes out. And then 360-degree reviews, someone brought up as well. Are you looking at 360-degree reviews, meaning you get feedback from everyone around you? And that is something that the executive team is in the middle of doing right now. And so I did mine about 1.5 years ago. It was helpful to me. And so I look to you guys to reflect on how that might fit in your departments and divisions. We talked about psychological safety, networking with your peers. Get out there and network with your peers in terms of a way to spark innovation. We had something in the city manager's report regarding Mike Palucci going down and visiting the NASCAR shop in Sacramento, and I admire, it was Roseville. I admire him doing that, because if I was Mike, I'd probably be thinking, let's go visit another wastewater facility. Instead, he goes to a NASCAR shop, and why did he do it? He did it, well, at least he told me he did it. That's kind of funny now that I think about it. Yeah, Steve, I'm going to the ice cream shop. We're going to check out if they're health reasons. So he did it from the team side to see how they set goals and teams for their different, they had the 3 different NASCAR, what do you call them? teams. I'm sorry, I'm not. Was it? Pit crew. Thank you. So they have the pit crews, so they group them, and then they have accomplishments of what they're going to get done, and they list on the big board, who's achieved the most as a sense of building camaraderie. And I thought that was great as an example. And then, what are we doing as an organization to advance continuous improvement? And that's the conversation. This is it. This is what we're all about. Is just keeping that open communication, talking about it, and knowing that each and every person in this organization should feel the ability to affect change. Because if you don't, then you're going to feel just stymied, and your job won't be fun. But if you feel like you can affect change, and you can make change, and people will support you, then it will enable us to advance as an organization and really improve the quality of life in Yuba City. I feel like it's being done. I do, and I take great pride in this organization. I see myself as the shepherd. I see myself as inherited a great organization, and my job is for the time I'm here to help this organization to succeed. And that when my time comes to go, that someone else will take the helm, and that we're going to have great leaders here. We're going to have that great quality service, and we're just going to have a group that is in sync with the community. So that's the way I see the world. I've kept you a couple minutes over. Are there any other questions that you might have that you want to throw out to me? If you can't think of any now, just hit the email, send it over to me, or poke your head in my door. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.